there, welcome or welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Samantha and this is my channel where I talk all about books. Anyways, today we're going to be doing a slightly controversial video. We're going to be chatting about my worst books of 2024. So before we get into it, the typical disclaimer, if any of these books are your favorite book, I'm sorry. And also, I mean no ill will to any of these authors or anybody who likes any of these books, obviously. I don't mean any offense to anyone. I know that we should be spreading positivity, and I will be, because the next video you see will be my best books. But today we're going to chat about the misses, because you know, not every book is going to be a banger. So I have 6 like disappointing reads, and I have 4 books which were actually like the worst books of the year. And also these books weren't necessarily published in 2024, I just read them this year. So we're gonna go through the disappointments first, and these didn't necessarily get a bad rating, but I just thought that they were going to be much better than they were, and they didn't work for me for whatever reason. So yeah, some of them are continuations in series, some of them are books that I just thought I was gonna love. Let's just get into it with my disappointing reads of 2024. This is in no particular order, but first of all, we have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I really thought I was gonna love this. This is like a cozy fantasy set in 1910, I think, and it follows our main character, Emily Wilde, and she's basically building this encyclopedia of fairies, obviously. And the last like community of fairies that she wants to find live in this like remote, very icy place, and there's a small village there, and basically she goes there and puts her foot in it and ruins any chance of getting help from the locals that she really needs. Anyway, along comes her academic rival, Wendell Bamblebee, and he comes to save the day and help her out. But she is really reluctant to accept his help because she hates him, basically. It's like cozy fantasy romance. This book was sweet, and I remember like in the beginning it took me a little while, but then I got really into it. But then the last 100 pages felt like really repetitive and really lost me, and I ended up finishing with such a bad taste in my mouth because I was just so bored by it. Yeah, I was really disappointed by this one because I thought I was gonna love it and I just didn't. I think I gave that one 2.5 stars, so it wasn't terrible, but it was definitely a disappointing read for me. The next one I have is probably my most disappointing read of the year, just because I had so much success with the rest of the series that I thought I was gonna love this one, and that is The Songbird and the Heart of Stone by Carissa Broadbent. This is the 3rd book in the like Nyaxia series, but the 1st book in a new duet, and the 1st book in the whole series is The Serpent and the Wings of Night, which I loved. I really enjoyed the initial duet, and I had really high expectations for this one, especially because it follows a character from the original series who I really like, and I was excited to learn more about her character. But this one was just so boring and so repetitive. You'll see that that's probably a theme for me in my worst books, is like if I'm bored, I'm not gonna have a good time with it. And yeah, it was just like the same fight again and again and again, and I was like, I'm just sick of this. But if you don't know what the Crowns of Nyaxia series is, it's basically a romantasy series set in this world where vampires exist and vampires and humans coexist. The vampires were created by gods, so you've also got gods involved. And in the very first book, there's this like a Hunger Games-esque trial that goes on, and our main character from that book is a human and all the other players of the game are vampires. And so it's very intense. I also just like the couple in that series is great. I love it, but this one unfortunately just fell flat for me. I will still read the next one because this one did end on a cliffhanger. But yeah, I definitely will continue on, but I was just very disappointed by this one. The next one I've got is a recent read of mine that I was really disappointed by, and that was Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. I've read one other book by her and I really enjoyed it, and that was The Unmaking of June Farrow. So I kind of had higher expectations for this going in because I'd already had a good experience with that first book, and then also I just heard nothing but good things about this, and it sounded like something I would really enjoy. It's basically like kind of a mystery, but with this like magical element to it. It's set on this small island called Sersha, and essentially about 10 years earlier, our main character Emery, her boyfriend, was accused of murdering her best friend and ended up like fleeing the island, although her boyfriend August was never actually charged with the crime. Anyway, 10 years later, August's mother has died and she wants her ashes to be buried on the island, so he has to go back, and it basically starts raising questions that everyone kind of wants to forget and bringing to light some conspiracies and things. It was just very boring for a book that should have been very entertaining in terms of like the mystery plot line and also the like witchy elements. It sounded like it could have been amazing, and it just really fell flat for me. It was also very like romance heavy. It was very much about Emery and August's relationship, and I just didn't buy it that they would still have these strong feelings like 10, 12 years later, whatever it was. It just felt, I don't know, Unrealistic isn't the right word because like it also has like magic and things like that, but I don't know, it just didn't work for me. Sorry, I thought the light was a little bit weird, so I've just changed the lighting, and I don't know, if it looks weird and different, that's why. Anyway, moving on. The next disappointing read I have is another one where it's an author I've read from before and I enjoyed the first book I read from them. Anyway, that was Recursion by Blake Crouch. Last year I read Dark Matter and I loved that book. It actually blew my mind, and that book was actually going to go into my best books of the year list as an honorable mention, but I didn't actually end up filming my best books of last year. Anyway, so yeah, really enjoyed that book. It blew my mind. It made me think a lot and I really enjoyed it. However, this book did not deliver the same vibes. I feel like Blake Crouch writes these like complex sci-fi heavy thrillers. Like I would say it's a thriller but with a large sci-fi component to it, which I really enjoyed in Dark Matter. It really made me think a lot. This one, I just feel like maybe the concept didn't work as well for me and it ended up getting really repetitive and it was really bleak. I don't really want to go into what it's about because I feel like I will spoil it by accident. It was like a super bleak outlook on society and how society would react to something, whereas I would prefer like a positive idealistic version. I'm sure like what he wrote is probably what would happen, but it's just pretty horrible. Like I'd rather look at society in a better way, even though I don't think they would do what I want them to do. I don't know. It was disappointing. I was bored and it made me really sad and like existential, which I did not enjoy. So unfortunately, I didn't like that one very much. The next one I have is like extra disappointing because of its length and how much time I put into reading this. That is Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. This is by no means the worst book I've ever read. It definitely isn't. I gave it 3 stars, but this is definitely the worst book in that series. Well, that's not true. I hate the novella A Court of Frost and Starlight. I really didn't like that. It was pointless. But this book is so disappointing because I loved certain sections of it. Like I have a reading vlog where I went into quite a bit of detail about this, but like there were parts towards the end of this book where Sarah J Maas spoke about female friendship so beautifully and perfectly. Like it just, you couldn't describe it better. Well, maybe you could, maybe someone else could, but it just really hit me so hard. Reading that made me feel like the same way I feel like when I'm hanging out with my 2 best friends. Just, it perfectly encapsulates that feeling of having like your soul sisters. That sounds so cringe, but you know, your soul sisters, whatever. I just really felt like she captured that so well. So I loved that aspect so much of this book. But what I hated was the romance. I did not like the couple whatsoever. And I thought I was going to love them together. It was just too much. It was too much. There were probably 10 sex scenes in this book. And I was just like, shut up. Like, I'm so bored. Like, I don't want to read this. I also don't think it helped that I read the audiobook. So like, I didn't want to like skip over in case I skipped too far. And like, if I was reading it physically, I think by the 3rd one, I probably would have just, you know, skimmed it because you're not getting anything important towards the plot during those sections. This one was very disappointing just because, you know, I really enjoyed the rest of the series, but this just was not it. And I also was like anticipating it for quite a while because I, you know, just hadn't picked it up and I thought I was really gonna love their story and I didn't. It also felt quite reminiscent of the 3rd book, A Court of Wings and Ruin, in terms of some of the plot points. It's fine, whatever. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either. Okay, the last disappointing read I have is one that I DNF'd. I actually haven't spoken about it on my channel because I DNF'd it in January and originally I thought I was going to come back to it, but then I just decided like, no, I'm not going to come back to it. And that is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I was really disappointed by this one just because I had heard nothing but amazing things about it and I could not for the life of me get into this. And everyone says give it 100 pages, like it will blow your mind once you get past that. And I tried so hard and I think I did read 100 pages, but I just, even beyond that, I never got into it. I just couldn't. And I was really sad because I wanted to love it because almost everyone else does. And I don't know if it was just too much for me to handle at the time, but it just wasn't for me. I thought I was going to come back to it, but it's just a DNF. I will not come back to that one. All right, moving on to my actual worst books of the year. Coming in at number 4, so the best of the worst, but still the worst, is The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. This was my first book by Stuart Turton and it is probably going to be my last. I did not like this book at all. I'm so sad because I thought the concept sounded so good. It's basically set in this world where there has been this dangerous fog which killed everyone off apart from this really small island community, and essentially there's something that's keeping the fog at bay. The society is kind of set into like the people, and then like there are 3 like elders who are basically the scientists and kind of control most of the things on the island. Anyway, and one night one of the scientists is murdered and nobody can remember the events of that night. So we don't know who the killer is or why they did it, and nobody knows. So they're trying to figure it out. And this book just went in circles because there was such a small pool of suspects that it would be like pointing the finger at one person and then no, it couldn't be them. And then we're pointing at another person and then oh no, it couldn't be them. And then we go back and forth between like 3 different suspects. And yeah, we just went in circles. And the twist, I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I remember seeing a review on Goodreads which was like, this is classic Stuart Turton. And so that has put me off of his books because I hated this. I thought it was terrible. You were also really supposed to care for the characters and I didn't at all. I thought they were so flat. Unfortunately, this was bad. So this is one of my worst books of the year. Anyway, moving right along, the next book on my list is actually a novella that I read very recently, and that is All by My Elf by Olivia Dade. This is one of the 5 Christmas novellas that Amazon released in November. This was so bad. Oh my god. Another case where this is the first thing I've read by an author and I don't think I will read anything else. I'm not going to say too much about the plot because it was like 50 pages, but it basically followed these 2 characters who were co-workers, and to make some extra money they like signed up to be like basically like elves, but they're selling like mince pies, and they have to go around in this converted weenie mobile and try and sell their wares. Oh my god, it was so cringy, and like it was not even funny. Like it didn't make me laugh whatsoever. It was just cringy. I can't tell you because it's so short, but I hated it. Speaking of another novella from the same collection that I hated, and I hated this even more, it's Merry Ever After by Tessa Bailey. Tessa Bailey and I do not have a good history, unfortunately. I've only read one other book by her, and that also made it to my worst books of the year list that year. It happened one summer, and I had such high expectations for that book because it was like compared to Schitt's Creek, and at the time I just watched Schitt's Creek and I loved it. I thought I was gonna love it, and I hated the way that Tessa Bailey writes smut. It doesn't work for me. I hate it. I hate it so much. It makes me cringe, and I just hate everything about that book. I thought I would give her another chance, and I wanted to read, all of the Christmas novellas, and this was horrendous. If you don't like the way that Tessa Bailey writes smut, don't read this book because it's about like maybe 10 pages of plot, and then the rest is just smut, and it's so bad. It's so over the top, so cringy. I hated every second of it, pretty much. Apart from like when the characters first met, I was like, okay, this could work, but they had like one conversation and then were obsessed with each other. It was not good. It was not good at all. And I am officially done with Tessa Bailey. All right, and finally, the worst book that I read in 2024 was Do Your Worst by Rosie Danan. I read this book for the vlog where I read the lowest rated books on my TBR, and this was in fact the lowest rated book on my TBR. And I can totally see why, because this book is not good. It basically follows our 2 main characters, whose names I can't remember. Our main girly pop, she is a curse breaker. She's basically been hired to fly to Scotland to this small remote village and break the curse on this little castle because they, I don't know, want to turn it into something else, which I feel like would not happen. Just as someone who lives in the United Kingdom, we're very keen to preserve historic sites. So unrealistic thing number 1, that wouldn't happen because everyone would be like, no, we need to maintain this history. Let's just forget about that for a second. She comes to break the curse on this castle. Clark, who's the guy, I remember his name, he is an archaeologist who has basically been disgraced, and so in order to redeem his career, he's come to excavate the castle, and he thinks that curse breakers are scammers. He doesn't like them. The 2 of them meet at a pub the night before the job starts, and they hit it off. They end up kissing, and then she overhears him bad-mouthing curse breakers and decides that she hates him and that they're going to like try and screw each other over, and then they decide that actually they just want to fuck, and they do that, and it's not well written at all. It's pretty horrible, actually. I hated this so much. I'm so sorry I'm being so negative, but this was just really bad. It was so boring. The smut was so bad. There's just nothing redeeming about it. Anyway, I feel like I have been ranting for a long time, and I haven't ranted in such a long time that getting it all out of my system again feels very therapeutic. But yeah, I didn't like these books, unfortunately. As I said, some of them were just disappointing. They weren't actually bad books, but these bottom 4, I would say they were bad. I would say skip them. Don't read them. They're not worth your time. But anyway, those were all of my least favorite books of the year. Please let me know what your worst books were down below. I would love to know so that I know what to avoid. Although obviously, if we have totally different tastes, maybe your worst books will be my best books. Who knows? But yeah, leave me a comment, tell me your worst books, or if you don't know what to say, leave me the like X emoji because I do not recommend these books. That is all that I have, so thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give a thumbs up. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe down below. And if you want a positive version of this, my best books is coming to you in 2 days time, so you can watch that when it comes out. I will see you then. Bye!